Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When John Cage returned home after 18 grueling months at sea, he expected overgrown trees and silence, not a luxury spa built on his land. What began as a homecoming turned into a war. They stole his legacy. Now he's taking it back, one lawsuit, one lie, and one fire at a time. The road back home felt like a breath I'd been holding for a year and a half. 18 months at sea, bouncing between Alaskan crab trawlers and Pacific tuna runs, just to save enough to finally invest in my family's land. That old stretch along Lake Greystone, 12 acres of trees, shoreline, and stubborn memories. My father built our dock with his own hands. I scattered his ashes beside it. Every rusted nail in that cabin still smelled like pine and salt air. This place wasn't just mine legally. It was mine in blood, calluses, and gut instinct. The last supply port I passed before heading inland was 3 towns back. I'd picked up a thermos of gas station coffee and a half-stale muffin and thought about how I'd start cleaning the property as soon as I arrived. It'd be a long haul to clear the brush, shore up the foundation, and maybe sketch out plans for a few lakeside cabins. Tourism was booming in this region, and I wasn't about to let some HOA-spawned suburb with pastel fences corner the whole shoreline. I turned off the county road onto the gravel path that led down toward the property, expecting the same overgrowth and silence that had always greeted me. Instead, I damn near hit a guard shack. Literal structure, white siding, a Silver Shoal HOA emblem plastered like a sheriff's badge, a yellow striped barrier arm stretched across the entrance like I was rolling into Area 51. A young guy in a polo shirt and mirrored sunglasses stepped out and raised his hand like I was some delivery driver. I slowed, rolled down the window. "You lost?" he asked. "No," I said slowly. "This is my land. Name's John Cage. I'm home." He squinted at me, then gave a condescending chuckle. "Sir, this is the private entrance to the Silver Shoal Wellness Retreat. Members only beyond this point." "I'm not here for your damn retreat," I replied. "I own the 12 acres past this barrier, including the shore, including the dock, including the barn." I pulled my wallet and held out my ID. "See the address?" He barely glanced at it. "Sir, if you could turn around and contact the HOA through proper channels." I threw the truck into park and stepped out. "Listen, kid, I've been gutting fish the size of your ego for the better part of 2 years. I'm not turning around until I see what the hell is going on with my property." He stepped back, hand on the radio clipped to his belt. I walked past the barrier and instantly felt a sickening lurch in my gut. The trees had been thinned. New gravel paths led toward the lake. A sign read Tranquility Lodge, 400 feet. And down by the shore, my dock. Except it was no longer mine in name or look, repainted white. Reclining chairs lined along it. A wooden arch with Silver Shoal Spa waterfront burned into it. My father's weather-worn tackle box was nowhere to be seen. The barn had been gutted and polished into a cabana lounge with fairy lights and a sign that made me want to punch drywall. Community refreshment bar. Members only. I stormed down the gravel path toward the lake, barely noticing the joggers in. Yoga gear or the ambient flute music playing from speakers hidden in the trees. 2 security guards intercepted me before I reached the dock, older than the gate kid, built like linebackers. "You need to leave the premises, sir." "This is my premises," I growled. "Who gave you the authority to build on my land?" They didn't flinch. One held up a clipboard with some official-looking form, complete with a Silver Shoal HOA seal. "This parcel is under HOA jurisdiction as of 11 months ago. Designated as unused public adjacent land. It was repurposed under Community Charter 11.6. Bullshit. I was seeing red now. That land has been in my family since before this HOA even knew how to spell waterside. They didn't budge. One started talking into his radio. I turned and headed for the HOA office. If someone thought they could ghost me off my own land while I was out earning my future, they were about to find out just how fast I could sink their floating castle. I drove straight into town and found the Silver Shoal Administrative Building, 3 stories of glass and smugness. A receptionist with 2 white teeth tried to stonewall me, but I wasn't asking. I demanded. And eventually, they brought out the queen of fake civility herself, Karen Merrill. 50-something crisp linen blazer, a laminated HOA ID clipped like it granted divine authority. I'd seen eagles with less self-importance. "Mr. Cage," she said with a pitying smile, "We weren't expecting you." "Yeah, well, I wasn't expecting strangers turning my dock into a foot massage kiosk." Karen gave a small, rehearsed chuckle. "Your absence extended beyond the 12-month activity window. HOA guidelines allow for provisional repurposing of unused land adjacent to community access areas. It's private property." "Unregistered for occupancy," she countered, flipping through a folder. "No permanent residence, no submitted activity reports, no communication with local offices for over a year." The parcel was marked as unclaimed and reclassified under community improvement use. "You didn't notify me. We publish notices in our HOA bulletin. Perhaps you missed them while fishing?" I leaned in. "You're going to regret this, Karen." Her smile didn't fade. "We'll see." And with that, I walked out, blood boiling, fists clenched, and a cold clarity settling in. I wasn't just going to take my land back. I was going to make sure nobody ever tried something like this again. The first thing I did after leaving the HOA building was park behind the old bait shop and call the only person I trusted with legal paperwork thicker than a taxidermy catalog, Laura Lowell, property and land use attorney, and certified bullshit. Cutter. We'd gone to high school together, though she'd swapped fishing rods for fine print. She picked up on the third ring. "Cage," she said flatly. "You're supposed to be elbow deep in halibut, not calling me before noon." "I've got a situation," I said. "My land's been hijacked by a suburban cult in press slacks." There was a pause. "Tell me everything." I filled her in. 12 acres, private title, uninterrupted taxes paid from my bank account every quarter, now turned into some goddamn HOA wellness resort. Karen's smug little monologue about inactivity windows and reclassified parcels, the guards, the dock, the spa. "I need you to tell me this is illegal," I said. "Not only is it illegal," Laura replied, her voice sharpening, "it's weapons grade, stupid." She agreed to meet at my cabin, what was left of it, later that day. I picked up lunch and headed back out, this time on foot from the next road over, cutting through a trail I knew from boyhood. Nobody was manning that path, and it led straight to the backside of the Barn Now Bar. From a distance, the transformation made my stomach twist. They'd installed new paneling, deck lights, even a damn juice bar facing the lake. People sipped smoothies on the remains of my dock, chatting like they were at a yoga retreat in Malibu. Inside what used to be my father's workshop, I found chrome stools, a water feature, a wall-mounted TV playing an endless loop of ocean waves. The barn floor I once stained by hand now smelled like lavender diffusers and mint eucalyptus candles. There was no sign of my father's old fishing gear, no workbench, just bamboo accents and too much white paint. I made my way back before anyone noticed, fuming, but careful not to act stupid. Laura arrived in her dusty black Jeep just before sundown, laptop bag in hand, eyes squinting at the new fence lines. "God damn," she muttered, climbing out. "This is worse than I pictured." We set up camp on the porch steps. She connected to the courthouse database using her mobile hotspot and pulled up the county's property registration system. She found my deed in under 5 minutes. Still in my name, still active, still categorized as private residential land. No transfer of ownership. No filing of easement, no reassignment. Then what the hell are they using? I asked. Laura pulled out a second document from the public registry, a scanned PDF titled Provisional Reallocation for Community Benefit, signed not by a judge, not by the county recorder, but by Karen Merrill herself, stamped with a Silver Shoal HOA seal and marked internal. "This," Laura said, pointing, "is a joke." She cross-checked it with the state's abandoned property code. Turns out there is a process to reclaim land under certain statutes, but it involves at least 5 years of non-payment of taxes, public notifications through certified mail, publication in 2 newspapers, and a judge's ruling. None of that applied here. Karen's using HOA bylaws like they're federal law, Laura growled. This thing wouldn't hold up against a stiff wind. She snapped a few photos of the spa complex, took a video of people lounging on my land, and documented the newly built structures. Then she drafted a preliminary cease and desist letter on her laptop, right there on my tailgate. "We'll hand deliver it tomorrow," she said. "Let them feel the heat." Before leaving, she added one last point. "We're not just going after the land. We're going after usage, rental income, unauthorized development, trespassing, maybe even criminal misappropriation if we find they lied on funding reports." I slept in my truck that night, parked half a mile off, close enough to hear the lake, but far enough to stay out of sight. My property had been turned into a spa brochure. My name scrubbed like I never existed, but now I had a lawyer. I had the law, and come morning, they were getting served. We arrived just before 10. Laura in her lawyer armor, pressed blazer, sunglasses sharp enough to cut glass, and me in jeans and a sun-bleached work shirt, arms crossed and jaw locked. She handed me a printed copy of the cease and desist letter and kept the backup in her briefcase, along with copies of my deed, tax receipts, and photos from last night. The Silver Shoal HOA office was all frosted glass and reclaimed wood accents, the kind of place that screamed, "We care about appearances more than facts." A young man at the front desk tried the usual brush-off routine until Laura handed him an envelope with legal notice in bold red letters. That got us into the conference room. Karen entered moments later, flanked by a wiry man in a charcoal suit who introduced himself as Gregory Vale, HOA counsel. His handshake was limp, and he reeked of cheap cologne and false confidence. "Let's keep this brief," Laura said without sitting down. "This is a cease and desist order regarding the unauthorized use and development of Mr. Cage's private property." Karen smiled like she was hosting a tea party. As we explained, the land was identified as abandoned under our HOA charter. It was improved in accordance with community benefit initiatives. "It's not abandoned," Laura snapped. "It's titled, taxed, and documented in Mr. Cage's name. And your charter has no legal authority over privately owned land outside of HOA covenants." Gregory opened his folder, pulled out the same fake document Laura had already found. "According to this internal resolution," Laura cut him off. "A resolution signed by your client, with no state or county authority. Let's be clear, Mr. Vale, this document is worth less than a fortune cookie in court." Karen's smile thinned, but she kept her tone breezy. "We've invested heavily in that space. The community sees it as an asset." "Then the community is about to be very disappointed," Laura said flatly. "You'll receive a formal civil suit by the end of the week. We're seeking return of the property, damages for unlawful use, and an injunction to prevent further development. If you continue to operate on Mr. Cage's land, you'll also face criminal trespass charges." "Clear enough?" Karen's facade cracked just slightly, the smile more forced now. "Let's not make this adversarial." "Oh, it's adversarial," I said. "You're playing Monopoly with real land. Mine." We left without waiting for a response. Laura filed the initial paperwork that afternoon. The clerk at the county courthouse scanned everything carefully, eyebrows rising when she reached the HOA documents. "Did they actually think this would hold up?" she muttered. By Friday, the lawsuit was officially recorded. We sent copies to the HOA by certified mail and posted one on the fence they'd built across my property line. Laura's legal assistant even printed a bold header across the top, "Notice of pending litigation, unauthorized use of private property." That weekend, it started. It began with a flyer slipped under the windshield wipers of every car in town. Title: Who is John Cage, and why he's trying to destroy our community oasis. A photo of me, old and sunburnt, pulled from God knows where, was printed next to a bulleted list. Plans to bulldoze the retreat. Aggressive behavior toward security. Staff: sued your HOA for trying to improve the area. Then came the online campaign. A Facebook group appeared overnight. Save Silver Shoal Spa. Dozens of posts, fake testimonials, dramatic claims about how I wanted to turn the area into a noisy RV dump full of out-of-town degenerates. Karen gave an interview to the local news, painting herself as a visionary civic leader trying to protect community peace from unstable landowners. They were spinning the narrative fast and dirty, hoping to drown us in noise. But I didn't flinch. While the HOA pandered to retirees and bored tennis moms, Laura drafted a second motion for injunction, one that would force a halt to all operations on my land until trial. We compiled a thick file, photos, documents, statements from my neighbors who knew the land was never abandoned. Then one morning, Laura sent me a message with a link to an online archive. "You're going to love this," she wrote. It was a city zoning board hearing from 7 months ago. Buried in the agenda was a permit application for temporary recreational use of adjacent lakeside land. The applicant, Silver Shoal HOA. The owner field, left blank. They hadn't just lied. They'd applied for city permits while pretending the land was theirs. And nobody checked. Nobody verified ownership. Until now. Laura grinned like a shark smelling blood. "That's fraud," she said. "And now we make it public." I knew the smear campaign would escalate, but I didn't expect it to go from Facebook comments to sabotage within 48 hours. Monday morning, I drove out to the cabin, my cabin, damn it, to take more photos and document the damage. Laura had advised me to start a running visual log in case the HOA tried to claim that the structures had always been theirs. When I got there, the first thing I noticed was the smell, not the usual lake air and pine. This was acrid, burnt plastic, and something sickly sweet. Someone had dumped trash across the entrance to my access trail. Bags torn open, food rotting, beer bottles, broken glass. At first, I thought it was random. Then I saw the signs. Literal yard signs planted right in the pile. Community zone, keep out. HOA logos in full color. I parked at the end of the access road and started walking. 20 yards in, I spotted my mailbox, or what was left of it. Smashed flat, pole bent like someone had driven over it twice just to make the point. The camera I'd installed on the trailhead was gone, ripped clean off. Only the mounting bracket remained. I took photos of everything, dated them, sent them to Laura with a message. They're done playing cute. But that was nothing compared to what happened the next day. I was on my way into town for supplies when I noticed something felt off about the brakes in my truck. The pedal had just enough give to make me nervous. At first, I figured it was the fluid, or maybe something from the long months in storage, but instinct made me pull over. I took a closer look under the wheel well, and my stomach turned cold. The brake line was cut, not corroded, not pinched. Cut, clean slice, no fray, like someone had taken wire cutters to it in the dark and hoped I wouldn't notice until I was sailing downhill into traffic. I called Laura first, then the sheriff's department. Deputy Halverson showed up within the hour, middle-aged, no nonsense, someone I vaguely recognized from a county fish fry 2 years ago. He didn't take notes on a clipboard, he took pictures, lots of them. Can't prove who did it, he said after finishing the inspection, but I'll be filing this under attempted tampering with a motor vehicle. If you'd driven another mile, you could have wrapped around a tree. He glanced at the wrecked mailbox, then back at me. You thinking this has to do with that HOA mess? I didn't answer directly, just looked at the sign still sitting half buried in the trash heap. That was enough. That night, I returned with a new camera system, 6 motion-triggered wireless cams with infrared and cloud sync. I mounted them high, inside tree trunks and soffits, where no one would spot them. The feed went straight to my phone. And not a moment too soon, the next night, around 3 a.m., the cameras caught movement. 2 figures in hoodies creeping down the slope toward my dock. One carried what looked like a crowbar. The other had a small red canister in hand. They scoped the deck, then disappeared under the platform, right near where I'd stored the fuel drums for my outboard. I called it in. Sheriff's department arrived 20 minutes later. The suspects were gone by then, but the camera had nailed everything. Faces were obscured, but they weren't pros. They didn't check for lenses, didn't cover their bodies fully. One had a visible forearm tattoo. The other limped slightly on the left side. Laura and I forwarded the footage to the county prosecutor. Within 24 hours, a warrant was issued for property search of a nearby house, registered to Stephen Merrill, Karen's nephew. Guess nepotism runs in both directions. But the real blow came when Laura pulled HOA financials submitted to the county for public records. Someone in her office, probably her assistant Monica, who ran like a data-sniffing bloodhound, found an invoice trail. Turns out the construction of the spa, the pier upgrades, the new dock furniture, they weren't funded by community donations like the HOA had claimed. They were paid for by a private contractor called Ridgeworks Renovation LLC. Owner, Derek Merrill, Karen's brother. Laura nearly laughed when she saw it. This is textbook misuse of HOA funds, she said. Nepotism, self-dealing, misrepresentation, the whole damn grocery list. We prepared an expanded civil suit and filed a complaint with the state's Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs. And then we went one step further. We contacted the local newspaper, not the HOA favoring lifestyle blog that printed Karen's fluff interviews, but the county's old school, ink under the fingernails weekly rag, the Greystone Gazette. The editor, Jack Hill, was a former investigative reporter from Portland who didn't care about pool parties or community yoga. He cared about public fraud. When he saw the photos, the footage, and the financials, his eyes lit up. Oh, this'll print. By Friday, the headline was everywhere. Private land seized, spa built without owner's consent. HOA president under fire for nepotism and fraud. I didn't smile much that week. But I did when I saw Karen driving past my property the next morning, her car crawling, eyes forward, lips thin as razor wire. The courthouse lobby smelled like old paper and lukewarm coffee, and it was packed with more reporters than defendants. I never thought I'd see the day when a property dispute landed me on the front page, but here we were. Lawsuits filed, subpoenas served, and the Silver Shoal HOA backed into a very public corner. Laura walked beside me, briefcase in one hand, iced black coffee in the other, completely unfazed by the camera flashes. She was built for this. I was built for dragging nets and hauling crab pots. But I was starting to get used to the smell of blood in the water. We entered the courtroom for the preliminary hearing. The judge was a hawk-nosed woman named Marbury, known across the county for cutting through nonsense like a machete through cattails. On the other side of the room sat Karen, still trying to look serene in a pale blue pantsuit, flanked by her lawyer, Gregory, and two new suits, who looked like they'd just been promoted out of a law school catalog. She didn't acknowledge me. I didn't blink. Laura opened with a brutal summary. My deed. Continuous tax payments, proof of ownership dating back over 40 years, photos of the property pre-spa, time-stamped footage of trespassing, records of harassment. And then the bomb. Financial filings tying HOA funds to Ridgeworks renovation, directly linked to Karen's brother. All of it bundled into a 26-page motion to enjoin further activity and freeze HOA discretionary spending pending trial. Gregory tried to counter with a passionate appeal to community interest and collective vision, but Judge Marbury raised one hand without looking up from the file. Counsel, she said coolly, your client appears to have financed construction on land she does not own, using money she did not declare, for a spa she had no authority to build. If you intend to proceed with a defense based on vibes, I recommend prayer. The gallery stifled a chuckle. Karen's expression didn't crack, but I saw her left eye twitch. The judge issued an immediate order. All operations at the Silver Shoal Wellness Retreat were to cease pending resolution of the property ownership dispute. Any further development, rentals, or use of the facilities would constitute contempt of court. She gave us 2 weeks to prepare for a full civil hearing. As we left, Gregory tried to play civil. This doesn't have to be hostile, Mr. Cage. I turned. Then you shouldn't have stolen my land, Greg. Outside, the Greystone Gazette had already posted live updates. The headline read, Judge slams HOA over unauthorized lake development. Spa complex shut down. The online comment section exploded. Some called me a hero. Some said I was a crank with a grudge. A few posted that I was probably going to flip the land to developers and destroy the community vibe. But one caught my eye. I lived next to Karen for 6 years. She fined me for putting out Christmas lights too early. This is karma. That night, I received an anonymous envelope in my mailbox, a manila folder with no return address. Inside, 5 pages of HOA internal emails. Most were boring administrative filler, but one thread stood out. From Karen, dated 8 months earlier. We can't afford delays. I'll handle the paperwork angle. Just get the site cleared. The fewer questions, the better. Assume absence equals forfeiture. Laura examined them and nodded. These emails were never included in the HOA's discovery response. That's suppression. We had a friend in the dark now. Someone on the inside. The next morning, Laura filed a motion to compel full document disclosure and notified the court of potential misconduct. Karen's lawyer panicked, asked for an emergency conference, claimed we were interfering with confidential communications. The judge ordered a sealed review. Then came the wild card. A woman named Janice Rutherford, late 60s, walked into Laura's office and asked to speak with me directly. She introduced herself as a former HOA board member, said she resigned 5 months ago after being pressured to vote for budget reallocations that didn't feel right. Janice claimed she'd been kept in the dark about the land issue until she read the Gazette. That's when she realized her name was on one of the forged documents authorizing the spa's construction. She hadn't signed anything. The signature looked like hers, but it wasn't. Laura took a handwriting sample, and within 2 hours, we had an expert analyzing the document. The conclusion, probable forgery. We now had tax fraud, misuse of HOA funds, unauthorized development, trespassing, and forgery. We weren't just playing civil ball anymore. This was heading straight into criminal territory. The next morning, a team from the county prosecutor's office visited the HOA headquarters. 2 investigators walked in, clipboards in hand, and 15 minutes later walked out with computers, boxes of files, and a visibly pale Karen Merrill refusing to make eye contact with the reporters waiting by the sidewalk. She looked a little less like a community visionary that day, a little more like someone trying to remember if they'd bought a paper shredder recently. The Silver Shoal retreat looked like a ghost town after the court order shut it down. The chairs on my dock were stacked, the juice bar was boarded up, and the fairy lights on my barn-turned cabana sagged like wet laundry. I stood there with my boots in the gravel, taking it all in, trying to decide what to feel. Victory? Not quite. The spa might have been closed, but Karen was still out there, scheming. I knew it in my gut. Women like her don't go down quietly. They dig their manicured nails into anything they can still control. Laura had been relentless. She had spent 3 straight days hammering out the final civil claims, while also building a criminal complaint package with the county prosecutor. It included everything: misuse of HOA funds, the forged signatures, and the fact that Karen's brother's construction company had been double billing for materials. The total fraud estimate was creeping toward $200,000. I was sitting on the hood of my truck, scrolling through the latest updates, when a message buzzed my phone. Unknown number. The text read, "You should have left it alone. You don't know who you're messing with." I laughed. Not because I wasn't rattled, I was, but because it was so cartoonishly pathetic. I screenshotted it and sent it straight to Laura in the sheriff's department. 5 minutes later, Deputy Halverson called me. "John, keep your head on a swivel," he said. "Karen's losing ground fast. People like her sometimes get desperate." Desperate was an understatement. 2 nights later, I woke up to the shriek of motion alarms from the cameras I'd set up. My phone lit up with a live feed of 2 figures, hooded and gloved, prowling near the dock again. This time, one was dragging something, a 5-gallon container. I jumped in the truck, called 911 while flooring it down the access road. By the time I got there, flames were licking the edge of my dock, and the 2 of them bolted into the trees when they saw my headlights. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from the bed of the truck and went at it, foam hissing against the blaze. My dock survived, but the decking was scorched black. The sheriff's department swept the area and found one of the containers tossed in the brush, half empty, still reeking of gasoline. The camera footage was crystal clear this time. No masks. One was the former Silver Shoals security guard. The other, a tall, gangly kid I recognized from a photo Karen had displayed proudly in the HOA office. Her son. The next morning, the news hit like a lightning strike. The Gazette's front page screamed, "Attempted arson at Lake Greystone. HOA president's family implicated." The sheriff announced an ongoing investigation, with potential conspiracy charges looming. Karen tried to do damage control. She called a press conference on the steps of the HOA office, but it backfired. Reporters hit her with questions about the fraud, the forgery, the attempted arson. One even waved a printout of the court documents at her. She broke character for the first time, snapping at a journalist, calling me a selfish squatter. That clip went viral overnight. By morning, even her own board members were scrambling to distance themselves. And while Karen scrambled, I was busy planning my next move. The court had ruled that all improvements built on my land, the spa, the cabins, the dock upgrades, were legally mine. I wasn't about to waste the opportunity. I called up a contractor I trusted from town, a burly guy named Dave who'd fixed my father's roof 20 years ago. We walked the property together, and I could already see it. Cage Lake Retreat. A place I would run on my terms, making real money off the very structures they tried to use against me. The first step was changing locks, ripping out HOA branding, and fixing what they had half-assed. Dave and his crew spent a week tearing down banners, repainting the barn, and replacing burnt dock planks. I even set up a sign at the gate. Private property, no HOA access. Karen must have seen it because 2 days later, I caught her idling at the end of the road in her Lexus SUV, watching from a distance. Our eyes met through the windshield. She drove off without a word, but something in the way her jaw clenched told me this wasn't over. 6 months passed. Cage Lake Retreat was no longer just an idea. It was a living, breathing place. The cabins were booked through the season, the refurbished barn hosted weekend yoga classes and fish fry nights, and I'd hired a small but solid staff. The guests loved the privacy, the scenery, and the fact that there wasn't a single HOA rulebook in sight. The money was finally rolling in. For once in my life, I wasn't living from catch to catch. But success, as I'd come to learn, makes some people vengeful. One cold October morning, I found the access road littered with roofing nails, dozens of them glittering like silver beetles in the gravel. I got out, started collecting them by hand, and by the time I was done, I'd filled a coffee can. A few nights later, the same thing happened, this time with broken glass. Then someone smashed 2 of my motion sensor lights with a rock, leaving the gate in darkness. I upgraded the cameras again, hired a security guard, an ex-cop named Ray, who didn't talk much but had eyes like a hunting dog. I filed police reports each time. Still, whoever was doing it stayed just careful enough to avoid getting caught on camera, and I had a suspicion who was pulling the strings. Karen had gone underground. After the arson charges against her son and former guard were filed, she vanished from the HOA spotlight. Word around town was that she'd stepped down as president for health reasons. What that really meant was she was lawyering up. Despite all that, the final civil ruling was still pending. The criminal charges were moving, but slow. Lawyers stalled, motions were filed, continuances requested. It was like wading through cement. But the longer it dragged, the more confident I became that we'd win. The facts were bulletproof. The law was on our side. Even the local opinion had turned. No one wanted to be associated with Karen anymore. She was radioactive. That's why I didn't expect what came next. Ray called me at 3:46 a.m. He was panting into the phone. "Fire at the main cabin," he said. "I called it in, but it's spreading fast." I was out the door in under a minute. When I got there, the north side cabin, the nicest one, fully booked for the weekend, was up in flames. Fire crews were already on site, hoses roaring, smoke turning the trees into silhouettes. I stood by helplessly as it collapsed into itself, one timber at a time. The guests had been evacuated, thank God. No injuries, but the damage was massive, and this time there was no doubt. The security feed caught it. 2 men, both masked, both carrying Molotov cocktails, approached from the forest edge. One dropped a ragged gas can by the foundation. The other lit the first bottle. By dawn, both had been identified. One was Ethan Merrill, Karen's son, out on bail for the last arson attempt. The other, Caleb Fisher, ex-HOA board member, recently fired after it came out he helped forge the original land acquisition forms. They'd parked their car off a back road and hiked in under cover of trees, but they didn't notice the new tree-mounted cams Ray had installed 2 weeks prior. The sheriff didn't hesitate. They were arrested before noon. And then the dominoes started falling. Karen was arrested later that day at her sister's house, charged with conspiracy to commit arson, intimidation, tampering with evidence, and 6 other counts. The local news had a field day. HOA president behind bars, Cage Lake under siege again. I gave my only comment standing on the dock, arms crossed, while a camera crew filmed behind me. They tried to burn down what I built, twice. Now they can watch me rebuild it again. Only this time, they'll be doing it from a courtroom bench. After the broadcast aired, bookings for Cage Lake Retreat tripled. People wanted to stay on the land that had started a war. I started getting letters from other folks who'd had HOA nightmares. People who cheered me on, who saw in this place a symbol that you could fight back and win. But I didn't let that distract me. I had a restaurant to finish building, and I had new security measures to put in place. Because I wasn't just protecting property anymore. I was protecting what it stood for, and I knew one thing for sure. Karen's story wasn't over. Not yet. The trial was swift. The DA didn't want a media circus, and Karen's legal team, what was left of it, was eager to make a deal before things got worse. In the end, she pled guilty to multiple counts: conspiracy to commit arson, fraudulent misappropriation of HOA funds, and falsification of legal documents. The sentence: 5 years, not probation, not a slap on the wrist. 5 solid years in state prison. I sat through the hearing without blinking. When the judge read the verdict, Karen didn't look at me. Her hair was pulled back tight, her suit too large for her frame now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something flat, like a light bulb that had finally burned out. After the sentencing, I walked outside into the cold November wind. Reporters tried to ask me if I felt vindicated. I didn't answer. I didn't feel anything, really. Just tired. Tired but grounded. Like a man who'd spent too long at sea and finally felt the weight of solid land again. Silver Shoal HOA was dissolved within a month. A full audit revealed years of mismanagement, phantom vendor contracts, and fake board meetings. Several former members took plea deals and got probation. Others vanished into their gated communities, licking their wounds behind rows of trimmed hedges and faded picket fences. Meanwhile, I finished the restaurant. We named it the Harbor Master's Table, a nod to my dad, who used to say that good fish deserved good stories. The dining room looked out over the lake, where the last remnants of the old spa had been repurposed into something real, something mine. On opening night, the place was packed. Locals, tourists, a few reporters who just wanted to see if I'd punch anyone. I didn't. I was busy in the kitchen, flipping trout fillets and checking the timer on the cornbread. And in the middle of all that heat and bustle, I spotted her. Emily, the ER nurse who helped stitch me up after the first arson attempt. She smiled from across the room, and I felt that strange little gravity you only get once in a lifetime. After dinner, I walked her down to the dock, the one that had almost gone up in flames months earlier. The moon was bright, the water still. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out the small velvet box I'd been carrying since summer. "Emily," I said, "I've had enough chaos to last 3 lifetimes, but with you, I could live in the calm." She said yes. A few weeks later, I installed a new sign by the gate. Just a simple wooden plaque, carved by hand. Cage Lake, private land. No HOA, ever. The townsfolk still talk about what happened here like it was a movie. They bring their kids to see the dock where the spa invasion ended. Some call me a local legend. Others think I just got lucky. But the truth is simple. They came for what wasn't theirs, and I made damn sure they regretted it.